This is the 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzero, episode number 46.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? This is Jeff Pellizzero, your host of the 18 Strong Podcast. I want to thank you guys for showing up and listening to the show, as always. We've got a great show today. We're talking about yoga, and not just yoga in particular, but yoga specifically for golfers. And we've got an excellent guest, Mike Brantl, who is not just a yoga instructor, but a golf fitness professional, TPI Level 3 certified golf fitness instructor. And Mike has trained with some of the best yogis, if I'm saying that correctly, some of the best yogis in the world, and has really delved into the strength training, fitness, personal training, specifically for golfers, and has really tied in the yoga piece to kind of balance out the program. And if you're like me, several years ago, I didn't really know too much about yoga. I had this perception of yoga as being, kind of a flexibility class, maybe a situation where you walk in, it's a hot, sweaty room, there's guys with their shirts off and yoga pants, chanting, auming, that kind of stuff. Or, as some of my clients then informed me several years ago, they used to just go to the yoga classes because it was a great place to go look at hot chicks that were, again, sweating and tight clothes and all that good stuff. So, but over the years, I have opened my mind a little bit. I've come to the realization that, strength training and the physical therapy world, that's not the only piece of the pie and the only piece of the puzzle as far as optimizing what we do on the course, on the field, that type of stuff. So we've even recently, I guess over the past several years, we've started implementing a yoga class, primarily in the summertime when we have a lot of our guys in for the off season, for the hockey season. We've got a class we have at Elevated Performance where we bring in a yoga instructor, and of course it helps that she is a pretty and attractive young lady, but so that draws a lot of the guys in. But they all tell us how great they feel and what a great addition it's been to their training program. These guys have been on the ice for 9 months out of the year, guys that are playing golf on a regular basis, and don't necessarily balance themselves out and stretch out and work on some of these different positions that may be hard for them to get into. And so we've seen a definite improvement, and I personally, going through some of the classes and working in the different classes, have really enjoyed the movements and positions and challenges that I've experienced in the class. So hopefully if you haven't tried yoga before, this episode will inspire you to go, maybe look out for a class in your area, or to search out some videos, or go online, or find a personal instructor. I have a client, he and his wife actually have a personal instructor that comes to their house, and it's made a world of difference in his golf game, along with the training and dieting and everything else that we have going on. So this is a great episode with Mike. He talks a lot about the ability to improve, your not just strength and stability, but the ability to ground yourself, know where you are in space, know what your body's doing, and then kind of harness that energy from the lower body through the upper body through some of the different motions, plus using it as kind of a corrective exercise technique. So I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy this episode. As always, don't forget, go to 18strong.com. We've got all the old episodes of the podcast on there where you can check out all the great guests that we've had. This is the episode number 46. Which, obviously we have a lot of other episodes and interviews that we've done. And then don't forget to check out 18 Strong on YouTube. We have recently, in the past several months, launched our YouTube channel, I guess you call it. And, we've got videos coming out twice a week with myself, some of the other featured coaches from 18 Strong, some of the guests that have been on the show, and we're going to have quite a few others coming up in the near future. So it's a great resource. We're just going to keep building on that resource. But go check us out on 18 Strong. Don't forget to subscribe over there, share it with your friends. And if you are a yoga student, you've done yoga before, you love it, please pass this episode on to some of your buddies in the golf world that may not be open to trying yoga as of yet, but once they maybe hear Mike talk and realize how beneficial it can be, maybe they will give it a shot. So enjoy this episode, and I will, as always, catch you on the other side. Hey, Michael, welcome to the 18 Strong podcast, and I really thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. To the audience, we have Mike Brantl here from Mike Brantl Golf Fitness and author of The Empowered Golfer, Yoga for Optimal Golf Performance. And Mike, you and I have conversed a little bit over the past week, kind of putting our times together and everything. And I was telling you that, I've really been looking for the opportunity to have someone on to talk about the world of yoga, and especially yoga for golfers. We at Elevated Performance, which is our facility here in St. Louis, we've got a lot of hockey players that come in the summertime. We've got a lot of golfers that are kind of year-round clients. And during the summer, we bring in a yoga instructor once a week to do a yoga class specifically, especially for the hockey players. They were the ones that really requested it, just to give them a change of pace outside of the weights and the strength training and all the power stuff. But they really understand, and we are happy to provide them with the ability to get something different, to help their body move a little bit better. And so I was kind of looking for somebody to bring on. I came across an article that you wrote for TPI. I believe it was almost about a year ago, and read your stuff, thought it was great, and I immediately sent you a message and said, hey, would love to have you on. And so obviously you replied back and were generous enough to come on the show. So first of all, just thank you for coming on the show. And I'd like for you, if you could, give the audience a little bit of background on you, what brought you into the golf and fitness world, and then we'll touch base and go more into the yoga stuff.
Well, in terms of golf, I grew up around golf. My father was an avid golfer, and I actually grew up with a putting green in my backyard and was a caddy as a kid. So I've been around golf most of my life, and I've been into sports most of my life, and fitness as well. I think I was the only kid in the neighborhood. Well, a couple of us were lifting weights, but I would think I was the only one that continued with it. And then I really didn't play golf until my mid-20s, though. And then I got into yoga in my early 30s when I went back to school to pursue my second degree in exercise science. And I was training for a marathon at the time. And I was just fascinated as to how good I felt with the yoga. And when I got out of school, after getting my degree and various certifications in strength and conditioning, personal training, and ACSM with their health fitness instructor, I got heavily involved in the yoga, and I decided to study. And I didn't really know where to go, but I knew what I had done with my exercise science background. I always wanted to do the best certifications and study with the best people, so I sought out the best teachers I could find in terms of traveling within America, and I did that, and I noticed early on when I was doing a lot of yoga that it changed my golf game. And I can remember one time I'd hit it into the woods, which is not unusual, and I had a shot. And this was back when I could still play a 2-iron. And I hit a 2-iron and I just nailed it. And I couldn't really see it. And I just jumped down like a cat into a deep squat and was able to follow the ball. And the reflexes, the mobility I had, I knew was based on the yoga I was doing. So I was fascinated that how quickly it had gotten into my body, because from being a serious athlete and a runner and having a lot of injuries, the yoga really started to resolve a lot of the muscular imbalances in my body, in my joints, the way I moved, and I was just hooked on it. I wanted to write a book in the early 2000s, and this is how long it really takes you to write a book. And then I really had to crystallize all of my passions together: the golf, the fitness, and the yoga. And really what did it for me was studying with TPI and then being able to incorporate that in a book with my expertise on yoga and my background in fitness. And So I think it's a fantastic tool for golfers because it can really help all the facets of fitness and golf fitness that golfers need to bring to the course.
Yeah, we just started that class that I was talking about. I think it was this will be the third summer. And so that was my first real introduction to any kind of formal yoga class aside from, maybe a DVD that I had stolen from my wife's closet or anything like that. But, going to that class and going through some of the poses and different things, I really realized how beneficial, some of those different movements were. As a physical therapist and a trainer, we focused a lot on the rehab exercises, the strength and conditioning and power type stuff. But when you get into some of those poses and, especially watching some of the other athletes, we've got some very high level athletes that were in the class, and these guys are sweating up a storm and having trouble getting in these positions and having some difficulty with some of the flexibility stuff. And so I really started to see, or it kind of opened my eyes to how valuable this could be. But I want to backtrack to something real quick that you said. You said you grew up with a putting green in your backyard, but you didn't start playing golf until you were in your 20s?
Well, I played as a kid a little bit, but, golf wasn't cool when I was a kid. I'm in my mid-50s now. So back then, we played contact sports. And I was a serious basketball player, and I liked all the other sports. I liked all the street sports. So it just wasn't something that was cool. I did it with my dad a few times. I thought I was, pretty good at it, but then I just didn't have the interest in it. And then I started working at a country club in my mid-20s, and I got to play for free on Mondays, and I went out and I was hooked. So I've been playing for about 30 years, and most of it to a single digit. I've had some physical issues that have slowed me down a little bit, but I still continue to stay as fit as possible, walk the golf course every time I get a chance, and keep myself in good shape with the yoga, with the weight training, with swimming, anything I can do to improve my body.
I just had to give you a little trouble there, having the putting green and not utilizing it much. Much like myself, I didn't.
Putt. I love that.
I didn't think that golf was cool when I was younger either, and didn't. Now I'm kicking myself that I didn't start until late 20s, early 30s to really pay attention to the game. So I just had to throw a little jab in there while I had the chance. But so I know that a lot of the listeners listen to the 18 Strong podcast possibly have no experience with yoga, may not really know what it is, kind of have an idea of what it is, much like I was several years ago. And I'm very curious to learn a lot more about yoga specifically for golf and what some of the differentiations are. But if you could just give us a general idea of, what is yoga and what are some of the benefits of it?
Well, you would have to differentiate because yoga in itself is about life, and it's about union. It's about a connection with your higher self and a deeper connection with a sense of God, really, if you look at it as a life philosophy. And then so if you separate it down to the techniques that are being practiced, the physical practice is the asana techniques, then, really, to me, it's about breathing, and deep diaphragmatic breathing would be the first principle of any type of a good physical yoga practice. And then the second would be that really it's not about flexibility. It's not how flexible you are. It's about a connection to grounding energy through muscle energy and really through stability. And that's why if you see advanced yogis doing advanced poses or even, basic poses, they make it look easy because they're really connected to that stability energy and the inner strength. And that's really what a lot of the yoga poses require. So, and I can remember when I first did yoga, I literally would shake when I would do a pose. And I was lifting weights 4 days a week and running and stretching. But when I would do yoga, I would literally quake. And it was just a new neuromuscular awakening for me. And I saw how powerful it was and how it needed to be part of the fabric of my workouts. And obviously then I became a teacher and I opened a studio and the whole 9 yards. And But it's a fantastic tool for any athlete, and especially a golfer, because I think golf is so one-sided, and and a one-sided rotational sport can cause a lot of muscular imbalance. And I think if you utilize a practice like yoga, it almost in a sense becomes corrective exercise. It becomes functional movement, and it will resolve a lot of it definitely will resolve the elasticity or the extensibility of your muscular system issues. And then I think if you have mobility issues, get with somebody like a physical therapist or somebody more skilled that can identify where your mobility problems are. But I think it can also improve that dramatically as well.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that with a lot of our players, and just with myself in certain poses and situations, and I can completely attest to the whole idea of the grounding, but also the muscular strength that it takes. And you said you found yourself like quaking, and you feel yourself kind of shaking and not being able to hold poses. And I mean, guys are literally leaking with sweat coming out of some of these workouts where you put them through some other high intensity sprint training type stuff, and they're fine. They're breathing heavy, but they're not sweating the way that they come out of some of these yoga classes. And I was always kind of under the impression, well, it's just more of a stretching class, and you can kind of do that on your own. But once I had the experience and found that it really does incorporate a lot of what you said, the corrective exercise stuff, which we preach about so much, working on the different joints and being able to have them go through full range of motion, and that it's not always just, hey, I need to stretch it. It's let's get it in the right position. Let's work on the muscular strength. And once the muscles are able to hold the joint in the right position with the right stability, then sometimes you start to see more of that mobility coming about because your body's able to support itself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I really, yoga postures are about posture. So, the basic pose, the mountain pose, is about good posture. So if you bring that sense of, a connection to your feet, I think the standing poses are probably the best ones for golfers, because it creates better proprioceptive awareness, better balance, better stability. Now I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Could you talk a little bit about the idea of the grounding effect of, when you are in some of these poses, and you mentioned how the grounding is a big piece of yoga itself.
Well, the only way to go for something to go up is to go down, right? If we're to jump, we have to do a semi-squat and, spring up. And basically, to move energy, if you think about any sport, a rotational sport, you work with hockey players or golf or pitching or the football throw, we're transferring weight from the ground through the core out to the arms or the implement, and in golf through the club to the club face to the ball. So if you can get a sense of that while you're, basically, even though most of yoga is stationary, it's really not stationary, because there's an inner dynamic going on. And you could be in a pose like triangle, which is a basic building block pose, and fall and wonder, how did I fall? And I used to fall in reverse triangle for years on my one side. And then I kept working on it. And eventually that went away. So if you're able to feel it while you're basically not moving, but you're creating an inner dynamic, it's going to be much easier when you actually have to move at a high rate or high speed in a rotational sport.
Yeah, and you made the point that, golf being such a unilateral rotation sport, that, doing a lot of these different things can really help to correct and almost reverse some of the issues that come about when we're swinging a golf club. What are some of the things that you would do for somebody who, let's say is very one side dominant? Is there anything specific that you would tie into a routine for them?
Well, basically, I found that I had my own issues when I was doing a lot of yoga, I would, either start with that side, like the weaker, less stable, less flexible side, because I find that generally the side that's less flexible is weaker and it's less stable in most people. That's the case, and so to either linger longer on that side. So if you're doing 5 to 7 breaths on one side or 30 seconds, maybe on the side that's, you're having issues with, either repeat the pose or just hold it longer. And that eventually by adapting it and holding it longer, you can work out those issues. With a lot of guys, I like to put them on the floor and have their backs on the floor and do some simple stretches that are in one of the chapters in my book with yoga belts, and just to make it easy, because when you work on the floor, you can kind of gauge your level of flexibility versus if you were to go to a class and they're having you do, certain things like seated postures in forward bends to stretch out your hamstrings are really advanced postures, and a lot of your proportion, your limb length, can actually give you an advantage or a disadvantage. And then if you're tight in your hamstrings and you got short arms and a short torso and your legs are maybe a little longer than the average person, and you look around and other people are grabbing their feet and you're just struggling to reach your shins or something, that can be counterproductive. So, but if you put somebody on their back, give them a yoga strap and have them stretch that leg and ground the down leg, with muscular energy, maintain the lower back curve off the ground, they can build a sense of where they have to go when they are standing. So, it's sort of like corrective exercise. You stay with the 4x4 matrix in a sense to get people going so they can feel their bodies and realize that there's ways to work the yoga around all kinds of issues.
Yeah, it's funny, when you're in a class like that, you're looking around, everybody's looking around to see how the other guy's doing and how flexible is he. And, there are some poses where one guy will get into it very easily, the other guy has a bunch of trouble, and vice versa. So this is a good point to make a note that it's not a competition when you go into a class like this. It's about where you are, working on your postures, finding out what your weaknesses are, your imbalances, and working to better yourself at those. Not, hey, I can get in this pose better than that guy, or she's getting into this pose way easier than I am. So just like to throw that out there, because I know we all get a little competitive when we're in these situations, and that's not necessarily beneficial for you. Yes, trying to push yourself a little bit is great, but not comparing yourself.
That's a super important point you just made, because what I discovered over the years is that I was built to do certain poses and I was not built to do certain poses. And I would go to advanced workshops and, or I practiced next to my wife for years, and she's like Gumby. I mean, she can put her leg behind her head with a pair of jeans on, standing up. And so, that you're built and born to be able to do that. And I would go to these advanced workshops and I'd say, well, why can't I do this pose? And for me, I was blessed to meet a teacher I saw his video in 2006, Paul Grilly, and The Anatomy of Yoga. And then I went and studied with him, and what I realized is that my skeleton was the final frontier of movement, and that to go beyond the point of compression in my skeleton was actually a recipe for injury. So to force myself to do yoga poses that other people seemingly do easy may actually do damage to my body. And so it actually freed me up, and I realized I was more of a strength-based, endurance-based, stability-based yogi, and spent a lot of time on my hands and my forearms and enjoyed that. And, and then I realized that flexibility was a byproduct of the energy I was putting forth in the practice, and that I didn't need to make myself into somebody else or somebody that I'm not. And that's super huge. If you can ever research him, Paul Grilly, and just go to his website, He has pictures of the bones and how different they are and how everybody's points of compression are unique and different, and that we need to honor that. And you especially need to honor it when you go to a group class. Because if you were practicing at home in double secret, you would know whether you could do that or not. And you would know the difference, if you were adept enough and skillful enough, the difference between, muscular pain and then joint pain, which is really where you don't want to go.
That's a great point, and I'm gonna, after the show, I'm gonna get that website from you so we can link that up for everybody so they can go over there, because that was one of my questions. What are some of, and part of this may be specifically golf related, but it is very important to point out that we're all built a little bit differently, and just to take a simple example, some people are built to squat, some people are not built to go totally down into a deep butt to the ground squat. Now we work on getting people into better squat positions, but again, if you look at the bony structure of some people's hips, their hip sockets just are not built the same as another person, and they may be causing more damage to themselves when they're going into a low position like that. So are there any specific precautions for the golfer that you would recommend they pay attention to? So if they're going to a local yoga class or they're trying to do some stuff at home, anything just for the generalized for the golfer. And then, like I said, we'll link up to Paul's website too so people can look there.
Well, I think the most important thing is like any form of exercise, there's always unique personal contraindications that you would need to be aware of. If, for instance, say you get dizzy when you fold forward, if you're going to a class where they're constantly going up and down, you got to be really cautious of that. I've taught people privately that, their blood pressure would change when they went up and down, and they had what's that called? Orthostatic hypotension.
Right.
Yeah. And so I had to modify this guy's practice when I would teach him slow sun exercises. I would have him come halfway up, and instead of coming all the way up, I would just have him stop and then pause, get his head above his heart, and then come all the way up. Instead of up, down, then after 3 or 4 of them, he's just completely shot out. So I think you need to, if you're going to a class, you have to tell the teacher that, and you have to tell the teacher if you have any injuries. You need to be real honest. And I think no matter what, you need to recognize that really a good practice is about proper posture within the practice and proper breathing techniques. That if you utilize what's called Ujjayi breathing, which is like the Darth Vader breath, and it moves the diaphragm, and there's a conscious connection to the core energy. The belly's pulled in, the ribs are lifted, the pelvis is in neutral if the posture requires that those are the most important things. Don't overstretch, and really pay close attention to your alignment. That's super important, because like any form of exercise, and like what you were just talking about with squatting, alignment is the key, because then that maximizes the efficiency for the participant and their unique characteristics that they bring to an exercise session.
One thing that I've really made notice of, and this is partially just because of the way that I'm built and what I have going on, but I know that we work with a lot of hockey players, and they have a high incidence of hip impingement. And so something that we really stress when we're in the yoga class and we're working on different stretches and hip flexor stretches and stuff like that is getting into that deep hip flexion. Sometimes, you have to be able to distinguish, like you said before, the difference between that bony pain versus just a good stretching pain. And, sometimes there's positions where you get into that hip flexion. And when I talk about hip flexion, that means when your knee is coming up towards your chest. So, your hip flexor is right on the front of your hip. But some people feel like, oh, that's a good stretch. But other people are like, oh, that's a pinch, that hurts. If you're getting that pinching and the yoga class is working on getting into those deep stretches, you need to be very careful and kind of lay low and back off, because there is a high incidence of hip impingement. And obviously golfers have a lot of hip issues as well.
Well, you're hitting compression, and I felt it because I had my hip replaced in the end of 2013, and when my yoga was very strange towards the end. Before that, I would hear noises in going into poses like side angle and triangle that were just were creeping me out, and I mean that became the most obvious example of compression for my personal example. And when I saw the final x-ray before I went in, I mean, I was like right bone on bone. So these people with hip impingement and or FAI, they have to be really cautious, and I think you have to find correct angles to stimulate the softer tissue rather than that bone on bone type of stuff.
Right. And what would you say to anybody that thinks that maybe yoga is out of their scope, or who is yoga for? Can anybody do it, or is there anybody you would recommend not doing it?
No, I think if you can breathe and you're standing upright, or even if you're, not upright, you can do yoga. I mean, I think it's for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I don't, and I think men are more afraid of yoga because women are good at it, and it's like the women should be in the weight room and the men should be in the yoga room, or there should be a balance somewhere there, I know when I first did it, I was fascinated. I mean, because I was like, oh my God, this like combines everything I want to do. I'm breathing. My heart rate feels like it's up, and I'm sweating a little bit, and I feel like I'm really getting a great sense of flexibility, but it's not overstretching. So I really think it's for everybody, and you don't have to do it all the time. I really think like anything, especially for the male golfer, the more often you do it, and just short bouts of it, the better off you're going to be.
If you could, golf is such a game of proprioception, understanding where your body is in space. Kind of talk to how yoga improves that. What are some of the different things that you've seen personally, or any success stories that you have? But it seems like the two work so hand in hand, because they are so much of a cerebral yet also physical activity, where you have to know what your body's doing and feel what your body can and can't do.
Yeah. I know when I screen people and you do the balance screen, that most of the people I encounter are right-handed, but most of them have way less balance on their left leg. And I know I did, but that was due to I had ankle issues when I was a kid, and a bunch of surgeries on my left ankle and my left foot. That makes it really, much harder for me to do a one-legged balancing pose on my left leg. But I work on it. And I think if you work on those, if you work on the two-legged poses and work out, the side that's what we talked about earlier, and then you get into working on your single-leg balances like the tree pose or hand to foot, or there's various ones, or even when your fingertips are on the floor in triangle, the half moon posture, that will really start to give you a sense of better proprioception, where are your issues. And I find that just most of the golfers, that lead side is just less stable than their trail side, because they're used to making energy, go back into the trail leg and rotating and setting some power into that. And then because there's a release, and because they never swing on their non-dominant side, there's a lot of imbalance there. And I think yoga is a tool that can help work that out. And there's lots of standing balancing postures, and they're a fantastic way to increase your balance and your stability.
Okay, so Mike, so let's say we have somebody listening, they're a complete novice, they've never gone to a yoga class, they've never done anything.
Excuse me.
Is this something that they could start doing at home? Do you have any good resources that you would maybe throw at them as far as videos or anything like that? Or would you recommend them first and foremost going to a class and trying it out there?
I would go to a class. I would get my book.
Which, of course, we'll have linked up in this show notes page.
I've made videos, but they're not yet published. And there's other people that have made videos. Not that I need to promote them, but I'll mention them. Catherine Roberts has videos, and what's his name, Roger Frederick, and so that's out there. And then there's so many videos available to you, and that's how I got started with my own personal practice. I had videos, and I didn't want to go to classes, and I didn't want to always travel. So I just started doing a lot of videos at home, and I think that's a great way to do it. And, if you can afford to get with some private teacher, that's a great way to do it. Like I said, my book's a great tool. I'm working on my sort of a rework of the first one I did. I want to maybe make a new cover and a few other things. And but I do also have it on a USB stick that I sell it. And, you could do Skype sessions with me if you'd like.
Perfect.
I'll teach you how to do yoga.
Yeah, we'll have everything linked up. How to connect with you in the show notes. What about does Paul? You mentioned Paul Grilly. Does he have any good videos for beginners or anything like that too?
Well, he teaches a style called Yin Yoga, which is a little different because I compare yoga to like martial arts. You have martial arts would be the broad umbrella, and then you have different forms of martial arts. Your Kung Fu, Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu. And Hatha Yoga, or the Yoga Asana, is like that. And he teaches Yin Yoga. And really, Yin Yoga is done without muscle energy. And almost all of it is on the floor. And I don't know if you're familiar with like the pigeon pose, that hip stretch. Mm-hmm. And basically, you hold those poses with no muscular energy for long periods of time in Yin Yoga. And it can be very therapeutic, but it can also be very disturbing. But his anatomy, what he teaches in his anatomy is just brilliant. And I think it can relate to any form of movement. And it really clarified things for me because what he explained to me is what I was feeling in my body. Whether it was with weights, how my limb length will affect certain exercises, and definitely my yoga, even the way I walk, the way I used to run, the way I swing a golf club, is all my biomechanics are affected by my skeleton and my proportions and my so-called advantages and disadvantages that I get through that. So I think if you go to his website, that'll be really clear. And his Anatomy of Yoga DVD, I think anybody that's a trainer or physical therapist should have that because it's a great resource.
Excellent. And would you have any specific, I know you've talked about a couple different poses throughout our talk here tonight. Any specific ones that you really like that, maybe the beginner yogi could jump into, and I could maybe link up a video. I know you've got a couple videos on YouTube that maybe we could tie into, but any specific poses that you would say, hey, go look that one up, give that a try, just to kind of get started?
I like the I call it the side angle triangle series, and I think there's side angle posture, triangle, the half moon where you balance on your fingertips, what else is there? And then the warrior lunges where you're on your back toes, not where your back foot is flat. I do not like that posture at all. A lot of people teach it, warrior one, and then your foot is turned out, your foot is flat, and then you're asking you to square your hips. Unless you're a very flexible woman, really, I don't think you can do it. So I love the lunges up on the ball mound of the back foot, and then the knee down lunges I think are fantastic. I think the pigeon is a fantastic pose. So really the leg postures are important for men, and then shoulder stretches. If you well, it's in one chapter in my book. I mean, the shoulder stretches are invaluable. What I'll do is combine the shoulder stretches with the high lunges. And I'll just take a yoga strap and stretch backwards and then lean to the side and challenge the hip flexors and challenge the glutes, and while I'm challenging my strength and my flexibility. So I think those poses are super important. Excellent. And those are the ones that I practice on a regular basis because, like I said, after I had my hip done, it changed my yoga practice dramatically because I had to, I spent most of the last 10 years on my hands and on my forearms with my feet up in the air. And because of the way my body changed, it was harder to get off the ground. I can do it nowadays, but it took a while. So I really had to slow down, and that deep hip flexion was an issue for a while, but I've worked that out. But I love the standing poses. I think they're accessible to everybody. I think you get to work with and against gravity while you're doing them. And so if you can just Google side angle, triangle, half moon, and any type of a lunge sequence, those are fantastic poses.
Yeah, that's great. I'll look up and see what I can find and link some things into the show notes here as well. And that way you guys can go straight to 18strong.com and look under Mike's show notes page, and we can hopefully have some videos there for you. And Mike, I'll tie in some of the videos that I know you have online so people can see those as well. We've got a couple last questions that we always ask on the 18 Strong podcast. First one that I like to ask every guest, just to get an idea of where their sense of humor lies, is, are you more of a Caddyshack or a Happy Gilmore fan?
Oh, Caddyshack for sure.
Very nice. And then what do you have going on here in the year 2015 that has you most excited with your practice, your business, and everything going on?
Well, I would... hoping to, I filmed my yoga videos that accompany my book. They were done at my old studio. I think they're well done. They're a little echoey, so I've got to either refilm them or just put them out the way they are, and which I think is okay. And then I'd like to create also an online, like 12-week golf fitness that would incorporate yoga, mobility exercises, and then strength and conditioning as well. So those are some of the things I'm working on. And I had moved to Florida, and then I moved back home, and I just closed the yoga studio. So it's been a very transitional year. So I'm just trying to get regrounded in my own personal training where I work at, and then reincorporate that. My wife is doing it. So there's a lot of good stuff going on, and we just want to keep it moving forward. Awesome.
Great to hear. And I always like to get a feel for the guests, what your take is on the name 18 Strong. You know, the name of the website, the name of the podcast. It conjures up a different connotation in everybody's mind. When you hear the term 18 Strong, what does that mean to you?
I told my wife that's a cool name.
Thanks.
I said, that's a cool name. And what I envisioned was that you can go out there and play 18 and feel strong throughout the whole 18. And who doesn't want to feel that way? I mean, I know I feel that way when I go out and play. But if it goes slow and I'm standing on my feet for long periods of time, I don't feel so strong. But the connotation of that is very empowering to me. 18 strong. That's like, yeah. How do I get that? I want that.
I love it. All right. Any last pieces of advice for the audience before we let you go?
Stay as fit as you can so you can play the best golf of your life.
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a game that we're going to play hopefully for many, many years to come. And if you don't take care of yourself, I've got a couple guys that come to mind right off the bat, clients that tell me all the time, they're like, Jeff, I wish I would have started so much earlier with this golf fitness stuff or just the fitness stuff and paying attention to postures and getting up from my desk on a regular basis. So I am going to second the motion as much as I possibly can there.
Yeah.
Mike,
saying never too late, never too old.
Absolutely. Mike, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Like the audience always knows that all of your contact information, Facebook, Twitter, your website, all that stuff will be linked up in the show notes page. If you guys want to reach out and get in touch with Mike, go to 18strong.com. You can look up his name, Mike Brantl, and you'll find his show notes page right away. I'll have his contact info if you want to learn more about how to get in touch with him as far as, learning more about yoga, how to do it properly, and get some instruction there. By all means, ask some questions, and I'll put you in touch with Mike for sure. Mike, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. It was a pleasure.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Hopefully you guys took a lot out of the episode with Mike, talking about the benefits of yoga, what it can do to your game, what it can do for your body, your both mental, physical, spiritual, if you will. It ties in so many different factors and can work on so many different pieces of your game. And really, as we mentioned before, challenge you in different ways that, the weights in the gym don't, the cardio, the interval sprints, that type of stuff. All the things that you're already doing, which can be great and are, working towards making you a better golfer. This is, again, just another piece of the puzzle, another thing to try to, really hit different areas, different strengths, different imbalances, and make you the best golfer that you can possibly be, as well as just live a much healthier, happier, fuller, more active and functional life. So as always, I appreciate you guys coming to the 18 Strong podcast. We will continue to have some great guests. I've got some really good ones scheduled for the next several weeks. And as always, if you have any suggestions, you have any questions, you have any comments, please either come to the 18 Strong website, leave some comments there. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, or you can always email me at jeff@18strong.com. And I appreciate you guys. Don't forget, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.